Let's talk Ballerina Farm. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I wanted to talk about a recent Times news article about the popular content creator Ballerina Farm, also known as Hannah. Hannah is married to her husband Daniel and they have, I believe, 8 children. This article has been very controversial. Hannah's kind of being labeled as queen of the tradwives. I actually have a video talking about my views on tradwives and like tradwife content creators and stuff if you want to check out that video where I dive into that topic much deeper. According to this article, Hannah actually doesn't call herself a tradwife and she kind of implies that she doesn't necessarily identify with that term. I'll get into that in a minute, but this article kind of took the internet by storm. So I kind of wanted to jump on and do a quick, although this will probably be long knowing me, video talking about some of the aspects of this article that people have been talking about. So I will say, full disclosure, I have not consumed the Ballerina Farms or Hannah's content. Some of it has come up in my For You page because I was looking up stuff about the article to prepare for this video, but I have not watched like their YouTube channel. I don't consume their content or anything like that. I want to state again, like I've talked about in my other video that I did about tradwives, I'm not here to judge anybody's lifestyle. If people are making lifestyle choices based on their wants and needs, I'm not here to judge. If you want to be a more traditional wife and mother, that's fine. If you don't, you want to reject that lifestyle, that's fine. If you want to be somewhere in between, that's cool too. My concern is I want people to be making decisions about their life and the path they take on their life from an informed place and with their eyes wide open, knowing what they're getting themselves into. We obviously don't know everything and we can't always choose the future, but I think the more we can kind of be aware of the pluses and minuses to different lifestyles, the more we're kind of aware of the reality of certain situations and we're more connected to ourselves, we can better make decisions to follow the right path that is the best path for us to be leading in our lives. I also want to state, because I do make a lot of content about masculine and feminine energies and I do know a lot of people get very, maybe triggered, I don't know if triggered is the right word, but triggered when I talk about masculine and feminine energies, and I think it's because many people assume that when I talk about the masculine and the feminine, they take it from a very like religious programming or from a very tradwife lifestyle. And when I talk about embracing your feminine energy as a woman, about finding a man who's in his masculine energy, I'm not talking about a tradwife life specifically. Like that's not what my message is. If you'd like to live a more tradwife lifestyle, that's your decision. If you want to come from more of a like biblical idea of man and woman and things like that, I'm not here to judge or anything, like that's your choice. But that's not where I come from the masculine feminine energy content. I come from a more spiritual place and I'm talking about things more energetically as opposed to having to fit certain traditional gender roles. Now, I don't think that certain traditional gender roles are completely irrelevant of gender or irrelevant of our energetics. However, I don't believe that they're actually as rigid as a lot of the sort of like tradwife, tradcon kind of mentality is forcing us to believe. And I also very much do not believe that every single person is meant for the same path. And I think that's really where a lot of this stems from, is, you know, this idea of the like a certain lifestyle being the only correct option. And I don't believe that that's true. I think, you know, we're all here to lead different paths and we're all here to kind of go on our own journey and we all have our own individual wants and needs and expressions and desires and goals and hopes and, you know, dreams for the future and things like that. And I just, you know, how boring would life be if we were all here to follow the exact same path? I mean, that would just be a boring existence for all of us. So I'm already going off on tangents, but I'm gonna kind of break down this article a little bit, give you some highlights and talk about a few lessons that I hope that you can take away from this. One of the criticisms of this article was that a lot of people believe that the reporter on this article, the journalist, was very biased, that she went in with a very judgmental attitude and then she made this article to sort of fit her narrative. It's entirely possible. I went into it kind of assuming that like a Times journalist was probably gonna have a little bit more of like an anti-tradwife conservative take. So like I went into it kind of assuming that. And to be honest, I didn't feel like it was quite as biased as I was expecting. That's my own perspective. Did I think she had a bias? Yes. But I am looking at this a little bit more from the factual information that she did give and making my own conclusions. Do I think if somebody was more like pro Tradwife? Do I think that this same interview could have been presented in a totally different way? Yes. So there is a bias, and I'm keeping that in mind. I still have some concerns, but I would also state before, again, I know my disclaimers when I go into this, I'm not gonna sit here and be like, save Hannah. Hannah is in the situation she's in. Does my heart break for her? And I'll get into that when I break down the article. Yes. However, what I would like people to take from this more than anything is to learn from this and to take the lessons from this experience into their own life and help it guide them to make the best decisions for them, whatever those decisions are. I'm not here to judge what your decisions are. I'm just here to encourage you to like tune in and listen to yourself. That's a big part for me of connecting to your feminine energy, is connecting to your intuition. As women, when you truly connect to your feminine energy and you connect to your feminine intuition, that's not gonna guide you in the wrong direction. Usually, women's intuition, and there's actually been, okay, I'm gonna go off on a tangent before I get into the article. There was actually debate, I believe it was our favorite nemesis, Pearl, went into this concept that women's intuition wasn't a thing. Women's intuition is scientifically proven. We know that women have a heightened sense of intuition. It's a survival skill. It's scientifically proven. Pearl made the argument that women's intuition doesn't exist because women make bad decisions. Women typically make very bad decisions when they don't listen to their own intuition. Women, in general, in our society, starting as young girls, have been programmed to not listen to their intuition, to listen to outside voices and to listen to outside influences, to learn to please people, to learn to give in and let other people get in their heads. And when you let other people get into your heads, you can't hear your intuition. Women's intuition is incredibly strong and incredibly powerful. It is scientifically proven. It is a fact. It's a thing. It's a survival skill for women. So as women, when you connect to your true intuition, your intuition is not going to guide you in the wrong place. And my guess is for most women, if you were to ask yourself, like after you made a really bad decision and things have gone really wrong in your life or something, if you were to ask yourself if you saw that coming, like if you saw that going the wrong way, you probably could say yes, that you knew it was going to be a bad decision, you knew it was going to be wrong, but you did it anyway. And you probably did it because you let outside influences convince you to go on the path that you went on, and you didn't listen to your intuition. You probably had a feeling, and it might be in your heart space, it might be in your gut, it could be in your third eye, it might be in your womb space. There's different ways that women feel their intuition, and if you connect to that, it will give you the right answer. It will tell you what you're supposed to do and what path you're supposed to go on. The answers are all within you. And when you make a bad decision, usually as women, it's because you didn't listen to that. You overrode that, and you didn't listen to your instincts, you didn't listen to your intuition, and you let other influences overshadow your intuition. So women's intuition is absolutely real, it's absolutely a thing. However, the reason why women will make bad decisions is usually because they don't listen to their intuition, not because their intuition guides them wrong. Your intuition is not going to guide you in the wrong way. Your intuition is there to help you, and the more you can connect with your own feminine energy, which is your feminine power, it's not your weakness, it's not your submission, your feminine energy is your feminine power, and your intuition is a big part of that. When you connect to that, it will not guide you in the wrong direction. It will guide you exactly where you're meant to go. And nobody should override that. Not your husband, not your family, not your anything. Nobody should override your intuition. Now, there is a difference between like your triggers and your trauma and your intuition, and that's for a whole other video. I can make a whole other, I think I have videos about that, but I can do a whole other video diving into that. That's not what this video is about, but I just wanted to throw that in with intuition because I feel like that comes up a little bit here in the article with Hannah, so I'm gonna get into this. Okay, now the beginning of the article does get into Hannah competing for the Mrs. America or Mrs. World pageant. She's been competing in pageants for a long time, and she's basically competing in a pageant 12 days postpartum from having a baby. I guess my thing is I would just be curious as to how much pressure Hannah was actually putting on herself to force herself to do this, and if it was really in the best interest of her health, because that's more my concern, is just simply, you know, with her having all of these kids, she already has kids, with her giving birth and things like that. I'm just more concerned with her health, physical and mental health. So I'm not necessarily pro or con her doing these things, provided she's acting in a way that is healthy for her. And that's not really my place to judge, so to speak. Only she knows her body, and I think if she is listening to her body and she is paying attention to her own health and safety, it's her decision. I'm a little concerned based on the article if that's really what she's doing, but it's not, I don't really know. But I would state that I want women to understand that trying to take on more and more stuff and take on more things, and whether it be constantly having kids, so you're constantly taking on childcare, constantly taking on projects, constantly taking on work, constantly taking on everything, is not connecting to your feminine energy. Feminine energy is actually about taking on less and slowing down. Doesn't mean that you can't do anything. It doesn't mean that you can't participate in the world. It doesn't mean that you're like a passive person in your own life, but it's not about this constant need to be doing, constant need to achieve things all the time. That's a masculine mentality. And sometimes it's okay for women to go through that. I've talked about this in other videos. Sometimes being connected to your masculine energy as a woman is a normal, healthy thing to do. However, when you are a feminine core being, taking on and that constant need to be adding more things to your life and that constant need to be doing something all the time is usually a recipe for burnout. We oftentimes program women from a young age to constantly take things on and constantly be doing things and constantly be achieving and trying to keep up with things in the world. That's not connecting to your feminine energy, which is one of the reasons why I say that the Tradwife lifestyle is really not a feminine energy lifestyle. It's actually much more masculine. I know that it dresses it up in, like, you know, pretty dresses and floral prints and, you know, lots of kids, and it makes it look like it's very feminine, but the Tradwife lifestyle is actually very masculine because it has to be very structured, it has to be very rigid, it has to be about achievements, about doing things all the time, about doing tasks, about serving your family. This is one of the very controversial things that I say about masculine feminine dynamics. The feminine is not in service, and that's where, like, my teachings and my study and my teachings about the masculine and the feminine veer off from sort of the religious construct or the biblical construct. The feminine is not about being in service. The masculine is about being in service. That's why the masculine is a provider. The masculine provides. Providing is service. As I've said in other videos, think about the masculine professions in the world. What do? They protect and serve. You know, police, military, things like that. They protect and serve. Think about the heroes, the masculine heroes in, you know, in movies and comic books. What do? The hero is in service to a greater good. The feminine is not in service. The feminine is not meant to serve. Now, does that mean that you can never do anything for somebody else? No, that's not what that means. But the feminine is not intended to be in service. The feminine is nature. The feminine existing is a gift to the world, but she doesn't have to do anything to be a gift to the world. She just literally brings her energy to her partner, and the masculine is served by her radiance, by her existing. That's the way that it works. Any man who's got this, what do you bring to the table, or expecting you to, like, serve him or do for him, not in his masculine. That's the problem with masculine feminine polarities. A lot of men say they want women to be more feminine, but they don't understand that feminine women are not here to serve you. They think that feminine energy is this Tradwife being in service thing. That's not feminine energy, that's masculine energy. The masculine is designed to serve. The masculine does, the feminine is. And that's where we've kind of veered off track here, when we start thinking that the Tradwife lifestyle is feminine energy when it's not. The masculine is in service to the feminine, but the thing is that the more that the masculine pours into the feminine, the more he gets back. If a man provides food, the woman can create a meal. If the man provides a house, the woman creates a home. If the man provides sperm, the woman creates a baby. The masculine provides for the feminine, but the feminine creates it into something greater. She's not serving him. She's taking what he gives her and making it something greater. That's why I get so irritated when men don't understand the phrase happy wife, happy life. When they're like, why is it all about the woman? Why do I have to make her happy? It's like, because if you make her happy, she makes you happy. That's what the happy wife, if she's happy, she will make your life happy. It's completely reciprocal. The problem is that men want the woman to give him a happy life without him having to do anything to make her happy. That's the problem. Because in reality, happy wife, happy life is truly like the most fair dynamic in the world. The man pours into the woman, makes her happy, and she creates a happy life for both of them. But the fact that there's so many men that fight that so much, why is it about her? Men that complain about that literally are the ones that feel like they should get the happy life without putting in any effort. That's the problem. I'm already going off on a tangent. I just started this article. Okay. There's a couple things that stand out in this article. One that a lot of people have pointed out is the journalist comments that it's so difficult to get Hannah alone. And clearly this journalist wanted this article to be about Hannah with so many kids around and with a husband that does seem to be trying to hijack the interview and not wanting Hannah to really get time alone with the journalist, which implies some controlling aspects. And I know a lot of people have said that this journalist was biased, but at the end of the day, if Daniel, the husband, was actually trying to keep the journalist away from Hannah a little bit more, or not let Hannah really do an interview alone, that does kind of tell you something about it. Now, how serious that kind of control actually is, you don't really know from the article, but it does imply that there is a certain level of a controlling aspect that is something I think it sends off a little bit of a warning in my mind. Even taking myself out of it and trying to take the bias out of it does send a little bit of a warning sign. So the fact that Hannah really can't do this interview kind of by herself, which could have been her choice, I don't know, but like it does send off a little bit of a signal of like, okay, is she really allowed to do things on her own or make decisions on her own? There is also a lot of talk in here about religious programming. I'm not like a religious scholar or anything. I probably could do a whole video talking about like religion and religious trauma, which I don't really have a ton of it, probably some in some way, but I've noticed a lot of things that come with religious trauma as far as masculine, feminine energies. I'm not gonna dive into that here, but if you want me to do a video about that, I can talk about that more. They make reference in the article to when they're describing tradwives about their like soft breathy voices, and I know I talked about that in the tradwife video that I made before. Those get under my skin, and I'm not a fan of ASMR, so I think that's part of it, but like those like breathy baby voices get under my skin. Like I'm like, please speak normal. In the article they do actually mention kind of the tradwife thing being like a rejection of the girl boss era. As I've mentioned in other videos, I do feel like it's kind of normal when the pendulum swings. So we kind of swung to this extreme like girl boss, like women empowerment, women in business, women sort of rejecting traditional lifestyles of being a wife and mother for being a career woman and things like that. And I do think a lot of women got burnt out from that lifestyle. Some just because they just were so programmed to take on too much, and some because they realized that rejecting personal relationships, whether it be traditional relationship or whether it just be, you know, personal relationships in general, just to have a career, wasn't as fulfilling as they hoped. And I would argue that that's not that surprising, because at the end of the day, if you do completely reject personal relationships for your career, you're probably not going to find complete and total fulfillment in your career. I'm not discouraging women from having careers. However, I do agree that the tradwife thing has kind of been like a pendulum swing of women being like, well, let's reject the career and just have the tradition. The problem is that these sort of like tradwives, the traditional women, are actually doing a lot more work, and in many cases a lot more work than the girl bosses were. They're just doing it in a different way, and in many cases they have to still be a girl boss because they have to earn money. Some don't have to earn money outside the home, but I mean, that is one of the ironies of the content creator tradwives, is that they're making a lot of money being girl bosses essentially, but they're being girl bosses in a way that is anti-girl boss. Yet they are girl bosses because they're running their own business, teaching women to not be girl bosses. You know, I've always found the irony in the fact that these tradwives are sort of portraying this lifestyle of being traditional and not having a career, of focusing on family and children, but yet they're making a career out of it and making a lot of money. So they are girl bosses who are pretending to reject girl boss culture, and to me there's a lot of hypocrisy in that. Again, no judgment. You want to be a girl boss, you want to be a tradwife, you want to be something in between, you do you, but there is a hypocrisy in the concept of making a pile of money as a girl boss in a career that is anti-girl boss, is like anti-women working outside the home. So you're working in the home and you're making a lot of money and you're selling women on this idea, which is unattainable. I would argue though that like all of this content here, and again, if you want to consume the content, you want it to be entertaining, and that's fine. However, you have to be really mindful that the lifestyle that people are selling you online is probably not all reality. There's other aspects to things. This is one of the things that really gets to me, is that a lot of the people sort of in the tradwife, tradcon, manosphere, whatever, lifestyle love to say that feminism has manipulated women into believing that their careers are more important than family, and that, you know, feminism was so manipulative and manipulated women so much into convincing them to have a certain life as opposed to a different life, or to choose a certain path. But then they'll turn around and they will manipulate women into choosing the path that they want them to take, and, you know, manipulating women into kind of putting the concept of being a tradwife, which I'm not knocking, but I'm just saying that there's a danger in painting to women that that is like a fantasy life, and that it's the answer to all your problems, that you're selling people a fantasy, and then when women get into that, they realize that it's not what they thought it was going to be. And there's a big danger in that. In the same way that I would argue that, and I don't know if I necessarily agree that feminists are doing this, but if you are manipulating women into thinking that rejecting personal relationships or rejecting love or rejecting anything just to have a career is the path that will make you happy, and not giving women the full story of like, hey, you know what? You might end up feeling lonely. You might end up feeling like you wish you hadn't put everything in your life aside for a career. You might end up feeling that way. Like, it's important to give people the full story. And you know, I think whatever path you decide to choose is the path you decide to choose, whether you decide to be a career woman or whether you decide to be a tradwife or you want to be something in between. Like, it's your choice. But I don't like the people who are selling people on this particular path is perfect and will solve all your problems and will be this ultimate fantasy, and like you'll never have any bad days, because then when that woman does choose that path, her bad days are going to hit so much harder because she didn't see them coming. And there's pluses and minuses to every life path. Every single life path that you're going to pick, there's pluses and minuses to them. And I think we need people to be aware of what those pluses and minuses are, so they can make a decision to be like, hey, you know what, if I choose this path or I choose this life, hey, these are the downsides, but do I think the downsides of this life are worth it? Like, do I think that the ups and downs are going to be worth it? Or am I only looking for the upsides to this, and I just don't think that this life is worth the downsides? That's the way you help a person pick the right path for them. I don't like the implication that feminism manipulated women into this life path by selling them this fantasy, but then they turn around and sell women a different fantasy, and like nobody is telling women the reality of the choices that they make. Probably dedicating your whole life solely to your career is probably going to make you lonely in the long run. Is dedicating your entire life to your husband and your family and never feeling like you have anything for yourself also gonna feel ultimately empty at the end of the day? Yeah, probably. Like, at the end of the day, as women, if we're constantly outsourcing our decisions to other people, whether it be to build somebody else's career by working for somebody else full-time, or whether it be, you know, living your entire life for your husband and your family, like, are either of those choices where you're basically disconnecting from yourself and giving so much to other people and never getting anything back for yourself? Like, are those decisions ultimately going to feel unfulfilling? Yeah, probably both of those paths are going to ultimately feel unfulfilling. You're going to need other things in your life, especially as women. Dedicating your entire life solely to other people and serving other people is going to drain you. For the masculine, it's not supposed to drain them, because for the masculine is giving. The masculine is giving energy. It's constantly giving. The feminine is receiving. It's being open and receptive. So if you are constantly giving to other people, regardless of who it is, you're in your masculine, you're not in your feminine, and you're gonna burn yourself out. I mean, you can't ever give anything to somebody, but the feminine is not designed to be the giving energy. It's not designed to be in service. It's not designed to give. The feminine is meant to be filled. Think about it sexually. The masculine just keeps producing more seeds, and he can just keep releasing those seeds. He can keep giving. The feminine has to open and receive. And she's got one egg, and she didn't give her egg. She gets, the sperm goes to the egg. I mean, whatever. I'm not going to get into a whole sex education lesson. But ladies, stop giving so much to other people is what I'm getting at. I also want to make a point. I know people, there's like this big push for people to keep having kids, and how many kids you have, I think, needs to be a choice that like you and your partner that you're having kids with like need to make for themselves. So I'm not here to judge people that decide how many kids that they want to have. I want people to know that it's okay to stop when you feel like you've had enough kids. Don't feel like you have to keep having kids until you can't handle them anymore, because that's a recipe for burnout, especially for the wife, because typically the wife is the one that's going to take on the majority of the childcare duties. I know there's this whole concept of low birth rates and things like that, and I do think that we need more healthy families so that we have more healthy families having kids. That's a whole other conversation, and that opens up a whole can of worms. I'm not going to get into that, but like when it comes to constantly having kids, I'm not here to tell you how many kids you should have or how many kids you shouldn't have or whatever, and I have a video about women choosing to be childless too. Like, if that's your path, that's your path. But like, please stop feeling like you have to keep having kids beyond your capacity. I'm not here to judge, but I just think it's something to be mindful of. Don't have more kids than you can handle. I do identify with Hannah when she talks about, like, the journalist asks her if she's a feminist, and she kind of starts to say she is, but then she's like, well, the word means so many different things, and I really identify with that. I go through that too, because I've had people, like, I never really called myself a feminist. If I were to identify with feminism in any way, it would be first wave feminism, because I have the radical belief that women should be allowed to vote and, you know, should have basic human rights and, you know, and should get equal pay for equal work. You know, all those radical ideas, right? But I'm not a radical feminist by any means. I have been called a radical feminist a lot on social media lately, which I find kind of ironic, because I feel like if you knew anything about my content, you'd know that that's not what I am. But again, I do agree that the word feminism has gotten so convoluted that I understand why Hannah is hesitant to call herself a feminist, because of all of the stuff that that word tends to bring up. I'm thinking about doing an updated video on, you know, femininity and feminine energy and feminism. I have a video on that if you guys want to look at that. It's a little bit older, and I feel like I should do an updated one, but I identify with her in that sense of being hesitant to call herself a feminist, even though I do think that she believes that some of the things that she's doing do have a tie in feminism. Like, she's trying to say that her and her husband are running their farm and running their business together, and I think she really wants to believe that. Whether it's true, whether it's not, I don't know. But I do kind of feel for her as to like why she is hesitant to call herself that, because the word feminism has gotten so, it's gotten so convoluted. It's lost a lot of meaning, because that word means different things to different people. And I know there's going to be people who are going to say, oh, well, being a feminist means this, this, and this, or this is the dictionary definition. It's like, well, okay, that's all well and good, but like, that doesn't really matter. What matters is, like, if somebody says they're a feminist to someone, what that person believes a feminist is now gets projected onto them, and that may or may not be what that person thinks is actually feminism. Anyway, so I just identify with Hannah in that sense of, like, that word has gotten so convoluted that identifying with it is just so conflicting, because it just means so many different things to different people. Okay, I'm gonna get into like the part of this article that just like hits me. And I think it hits me hard for a lot of different reasons. Basically, the journalist asked Hannah if this was the life she intended, and she says no. And then she explains that she's always dreamed of being a ballerina. And I didn't realize until reading this article, like, her entire story as far as ballet. I had been told that this was called Ballerina Farm because she had been a ballerina, which she technically was. But I didn't realize that she had given up that life to live this life. It's her life path, and it's her journey that she has to live with. It breaks my heart as someone who's been in the performing arts and knows the passion of performing and being on stage and things like that. And I'm just gonna say this, look, I would have given anything to be a dancer. I know that sounds ridiculous, but like, I wanted to dance so badly when I was a kid, and my parents wouldn't let me. They wanted me to focus on school, and I was like, I don't want to learn stuff. I want to be a dancer. And they wouldn't let me take dance classes. I started taking dance classes when I was a teenager, so I was older. And I remember I started taking classes, and my teacher was like shocked that I picked up steps so quickly. And I remember telling her about how I had been like dying to take dance classes my whole life. And that I remember my teacher saying to me, she's like, I feel like it's been pent up inside you for so long, and you've wanted to take classes so much that like you just pick up this stuff so quickly. Granted, I never had the body type to be a dancer, at least not one that didn't involve dollar bills. You know, I didn't start until I was in my late teens, so I obviously didn't have the extensive training, and the body positivity thing was certainly not a movement back then. Maybe if it had been when I was a teenager, I might have been able to be like a curvier dancer or something like that, but those just weren't options for me. But I just think to myself, and again, this is me, that if I had had the opportunity to dance, and I had had the opportunity to like go to Juilliard, and I'd had the opportunity, I mean, I almost applied to Juilliard for acting, and I chickened out because I was too, like, I didn't have the self-confidence to actually like prepare a monologue and stuff. Like I did a lot of acting when I was younger because that was, I couldn't be a dancer. So it was like, well, I guess I'll do acting, because in my naive mind, I thought I could do acting at any shape or size. You can't really, that's a myth, but that's a whole thing. Then I got into stand-up comedy, and because I thought, well, I can do that at any shape and size. That was a whole thing, and you know, I'm not gonna dive into that. But like, I look at the situation of this woman who wanted so much to be a ballerina, and she could have, like, it would have been a different story if like she had gotten injured, or if she just couldn't make the cut, or she didn't have the right body type for it, and she had to give it up for some reason, and she chose this life. But the fact that she had these opportunities and she could have done it, and clearly, just based on what little content of theirs I've seen, she clearly throws in dance moves all the time. Like, it's in her. I even noticed for myself, and like other people will get mad at me, but like there's times when I'm like sitting or standing someplace and I'll start doing like little tap dance moves and stuff like that, because my feet just like start tap dancing or something. Like, I feel like once you're a dancer, you're always a dancer. And the fact that she could have done it professionally, I mean, again, I'm putting my own judgment on this, like her choice, her life path, but I'm like, if I could have had the opportunity to be a professional dancer, I don't care, like, son of a billionaire, wouldn't have mattered. I wouldn't have cared. I would have been like, whatever, if you want to fly me to the places where I'm going to be paid to dance, that's fine. But like, nothing could have made me give that up. So it breaks my heart to know that she had these opportunities. She had the ability to live her dream, and she couldn't do it. And the fact that they've named this farm after a dream that she gave up, and I'm not saying she regrets it. Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. I don't know. The article makes it seem like there's regret there, which it's gonna eat away at her, and it's probably gonna eat away at her marriage, at her relationship with her kids. Like, it probably is long term. It's her path, it's her decision. It's not for us to, you know, tell her what to do. But it breaks my heart because, you know, I can't imagine. I can't imagine being able to do that. And I think part of it is because it's not something that I was ever able to do. But it got me really emotional too, because I know my grandmother, she died when I was a baby, so I never got to know her. I was always told that she was training to be a professional dancer, and she gave it up. And I think part of it was because she had 6 kids, and part of it was because her and I have the same body type. So when she was younger, she could get away with it, but then as she got older, he's got in the way. Like, literally. So reading this and knowing my own ancestral stuff, and knowing that, like, honestly, for those of you who've been following me for a while know that I got married, but later in life, I had a very short marriage. I gave up stand-up comedy when I got married because I believed when I got married, I was planning a wedding, so I was really busy. I anticipated that we were going to be getting a home and starting a family, and so I walked away from stand-up comedy, which I had been doing for over a decade. I made the choice because I was at a point where I was like, I want a home, I want a family, I want to do this, I want to put my comedy career on the side. I was getting very bitter and jaded with my comedy career, and I was ready for that. Now, granted, I married somebody who wanted me to leave comedy. He didn't tell me to, but he wanted me to. But I made the decision myself. Now, I believe I picked a partner because I wanted to change things. I wanted to change my life. I wanted to do something different. And I picked a partner who, like, fed into what I already wanted. Can be healthy, and it can be not healthy depending on the situation. In my situation, it wasn't really that healthy. When I realized that the home and the family wasn't gonna happen with the man I had married, I ended up going back into comedy because I needed something, because I felt so lost and I felt so confused and everything. And then I ended up walking away from comedy afterwards. But I made the decision myself. You know, I don't know if Hannah made the decision herself or not. The fact that in the article it really makes it sound like she kind of got pushed into this, and I feel like she might be just making the best of what she kind of got pushed into. It's heartbreaking. And you know, maybe she's fine, maybe she's not, I don't know. Her decision, her path. If you have a dream, if you have a path, if you have something you're working towards, you're actively working towards it, you're making the steps, and you have this dream, you have this path, the right relationship is not going to make you give up your dreams and give up your path. Like, if it's truly in alignment, like if it's a toxic thing, like, well, my dream is just to sleep with as many people as possible, or my dream is to try every drug out there, or my dream is to just, you know, gamble my life away or something. Like I'm not talking about like toxic stuff, but like if you have a dream, if you have a goal, you have a purpose in life, you have a passion in life, the right relationship is not going to make you give that up. That's why when people always talk about sacrifices and sacrificing, of course in relationships you're going to have compromise. There's going to be different aspects. When you have kids and you add kids into a situation, things are going to change. Like that's part of life. However, your life choices should never force you to give up on something that you truly love and that you truly have a passion for. I don't believe that the right relationship should feel like you have to sacrifice everything for it. And that goes for men or women. Like, I mean, I understand like if it's giving up on just sort of like superficial pleasures in life, that's a different story. But if we're talking about giving up like a dream, the right relationship isn't gonna make you do that. And I know in the article, Hannah kind of makes a comment about Daniel gave up his career path too, so they both sacrificed. The journalist does kind of skew it that she doesn't view that Daniel actually gave up anything because these decisions and how they live their life were Daniel's. I don't think necessarily that Hannah doesn't get any say in how their life is. It seems like, you know, Hannah has implied that she believes that them co-running their business together, them co-running their farm and their company together, that they run like the warehouse, I think they implied it was what she saw her parents doing. So like that's what she wanted. So I get the impression that it's not like she doesn't have any say in the way that their life goes. But again, it does kind of feel like Hannah's trying to justify that Daniel sacrificed things too, when you have to ask yourself, if Daniel felt like doing this or having this life or having this farm and all this kind of stuff was a big sacrifice for him, and it was also a big sacrifice for Hannah to give up her dreams, then why are they doing this? Like, if they both feel like they have to sacrifice so much for this, then why are they doing this? I feel like that's a common dynamic where when you're in a relationship, I notice, I'm sure this goes both ways, but I notice this more where men have this idea that they're sacrificing so much to have a family. And in reality, men's lives don't change that dramatically, and definitely not for the negative when they have a family. It costs them more money. However, married men with families on average make a significantly larger amount of money than single men. I'd be the first to say, if a man feels like he is at a job he's miserable at, that he just does because he wants to support a family, then you got to ask yourself, like, what is it that you really want to do? Like, what is your passion and purpose? Like, what is your greater purpose? What can you do to make yourself feel like you're actually, you know, having a fulfilling life and a fulfilling career? Like, find your ambition, like find your, and I don't mean like throw everything away and just, you know, go broke or something, but like, what is your ambition? I know a lot of guys are like, well, I'm not sleeping around, and like that's their sacrifice, which isn't really a sacrifice. It's like you made a commitment to somebody, whatever. Like, men always like to pretend that they're sacrificing so much when they're not really sacrificing nearly as much. They don't even have to sacrifice their bodies in order to have a baby, for God's sakes. It goes into the whole aspect of like the fact that Hannah has to like hide that she needed medical care for one of her kids. She was giving birth and had to kind of keep it on the down low, which is quite concerning. But again, women are the ones that tend to have to do most of the sacrificing. Too often, men have this idea that they're sacrificing so much for their wife and their family, which in reality, it's not really so much that they're sacrificing themselves for their life and their family. It's just that most men don't actually have the courage to go out and find their true passion and purpose in life, and they blame that on their family. So they do a job that they're just not happy with. They resent their wife and children because they feel like they have to do that job just because of their wife and children, when in reality, you're doing that job because you haven't actually had the courage to find out what your true passion and purpose is in life, and you're blaming that on your wife and children. But because these men are miserable with what they're doing, they don't want their wives to be happy doing anything. In fact, a lot of these men will whine and complain like, why don't women value motherhood? Why don't women want to support the family? But if a woman makes it look like she's enjoying taking care of the kids and the family and the home too much, the husband will have to then turn around and make her life miserable because he's unhappy doing what he's doing, and he resents her if she's happy doing what she's doing. I think that's way too common. I'm not saying all men do this, but I think it's way too common that men are miserable with their lives. They don't want to do anything to actually better themselves or better their lives. Because they're miserable, they want the women in their lives to be miserable too, because God forbid the woman actually be happy with something that she does or happy with her choices, because the man's like, well, if I have to be miserable, she has to be miserable too. And then these guys wonder why their wives are so miserable all the time. When in reality, like, I swear, I'm like begging men, stop sinking into victimhood and just figure out what it is that you want to do with your life. Like, figure out what your purpose is, like why you're here. Like, do the work to figure that out instead of sitting around and being miserable and then resenting women for getting any kind of joy and pleasure out of their life and feeling like you have to make the woman's life miserable. I'm not saying that that's what's happening with Daniel and Hannah. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and I'm gonna make a huge assumption here. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Either way, this does happen. So I want women to be aware that this dynamic does happen, whether it's true in this case or whether it's not. I have a theory that Daniel was living off of daddy's money, didn't really have a clear direction, didn't really have a clear path because he didn't need to, because he had, you know, the trust fund and he grew up with all the advantages and he wasn't required to actually find a true passion and purpose in life. So he met a woman who had a very clear, distinct passion and purpose and was good at it and was on the right path and had everything all lined up for her life to go exactly the way she wanted it to. And he resented that and felt a need to destroy that because he didn't have that within himself. So he didn't want her to have that. And that's really common with men who have been coddled, with men that haven't had the true leadership or the kick in the butt or something to like find their purpose, to find their reason for being here, to find their passion and purpose. Ladies, if you have a passion and a purpose in life, a drive, ambition, something in your life that you're truly, truly passionate about. Some people don't have that, but if you have that and you pair with a man who does not meet you there or exceed that, he will end up resenting you for that. And he will probably try to destroy it. I hate to say it, but that's the way that men and women work. And I mean, I can say this from my own personal experience that this has happened to me. I've had more like passion and ambition than every guy I've ever dated, and they've always ended up resenting me for it. And I'm not even like a super high achiever, right? Like, I'm not even some kind of like big girl boss CEO person or anything like that. I wasn't even really making a ton of money or anything like that, but like I had more drive and ambition and passion for, you know, for me it was mostly creative fields. I mean, you know, same with Hannah, it was ballet. Like, she had a true passion, and men that have not found that passion want to destroy a woman's passion because they resent it, because they don't have it. I don't know for sure if that's what's going on, but I would be willing to bet based on the circumstances that that's what's happening. And one of the biggest red flags in this entire article, and I was actually going to break down everything in this article, and this is just going on way too long because I went on too many tangents, but one of the biggest red flags in this article, the biggest red flag of all, is the fact that when Hannah and Daniel met, she would not go out with him for 6 months, and like, more power to her for sticking to her guns and being like, not interested. I don't know. She doesn't really specify like why. If she just wasn't interested in him, or she was so focused on school and so focused on, you know, her passion and purpose and stuff, but she didn't want to go out with him for 6 months. He pursued her, which, you know, more power to him for pursuing her. A lot of people have said that the way he was pursuing her, you know, was an invasion of privacy, and the fact that he used his connections at his father's airline to get an airline ticket next to her that kind of became their first date. Some say that's an invasion of privacy and that's creepy. Some people would think that that's just like really passionate. Where you stand on that is your own personal decision. But he pursued her, and, you know, more power to him for taking the initiative to pursue what he wanted. However, the fact that when she did decide to give him a chance, the fact that she said she wanted to wait a year because she wanted to finish school and he didn't want to wait, and they ended up like getting engaged in a month. They got married after 2 months, and she got pregnant after month 3. That is a huge, huge, huge red flag. Here's the thing. What she was asking for, a year, getting to know each other for a year. Granted, they had known each other for 6 months prior to that, but they weren't dating. Dating someone for a year, I think, is actually smart. Somebody said this to me one time, that you should never marry someone you've known less than a year, because you don't know how people are in every season of the year. You know, like, some people have seasonal depression, and some people have certain, you know, hobbies that they're into. Like, are you going to be a football widow? Is somebody going to be spending their entire, you know, summers sailing the world? Are people going to get really depressed in the wintertime? It's really important to kind of know someone through like all the seasons of the year to know if the two of you have like lifestyle compatibility. And the fact that she, you know, she had a year, it was 1 year, and like, I'm calculating based on the article, I might be off here, but she was maybe like 22, 21, 22. So again, this was not like the clock was ticking or anything. Like she, you know, I mean, I understand sometimes when people are a little bit older, they want to move things faster because, you know, if you want to have a family and things like that, but it's not like her biological clock was ticking here. The fact that she wanted to wait a year and he pushed and ended up insisting on them getting married before she finished her schooling and her getting pregnant before she had to finish her Juilliard dance degree pregnant. That to me is the biggest red flag of them all. Because what she was requesting, like her boundaries and her request for the relationship, was not ridiculous. It was not beyond the realm of like a reasonable request. And the fact that he pushed. Now, I have a theory, because at one point in the article when they're kind of touching on the topic of abortion, which, I mean, I guess it's topical because of the things that are in the news now. It did for me, talking about the topic of abortion in this article, seemed a little out of left field, I thought. I understand them talking about whether or not she plans pregnancies and birth control and stuff, someone without many kids. That's a reasonable question. The topic of abortion, for me in the article, felt a little bit like they were trying to get in like some kind of like a trendy political topic. It seemed out of place for me. But when they talked about that, I don't think that they ever actually said that they were against premarital sex. But I do know that they are very religious and they're very Mormon. I'm willing to bet that Hannah was gonna make him wait until they were married before they had sex, and he just didn't want to wait. And that's where I get really conflicted about kind of the religious ideas of waiting until marriage. You want to wait until marriage, you don't want to wait until marriage, I think that's your choice. Not telling anybody what they should believe, and if you have religious reasons for wanting to wait till marriage or anything like that, like, I honor that, I respect it. And I don't encourage promiscuity. I've talked about this in a lot of other videos, but I don't encourage it because I don't think promiscuity is healthy for anybody, men or women. However, one thing I have noticed is that unfortunately what happens is when you have people that are very deeply religious and they want to wait till marriage, or they insist on waiting until marriage, which is fine, all of a sudden they have to get married immediately, and they're making the decision to get married with their hormones and not reality. Okay, so I wonder, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm wondering if the reason why Daniel was so insistent on getting married right away is because he was thinking with his hormones and he wasn't actually thinking with his brain, and that Hannah was probably going to make him wait until they got married. So her saying, I want to wait a year, he was like, no, I'm not waiting that long. And the fact that she got pregnant like so quickly and so immediately, I gotta be honest, in the ballet world, with the stress on your body that ballet puts you through, I find that kind of surprising, like that she got pregnant that quickly. I realize she's young, but like the ballet world and stuff, I'm just gonna say I'm surprised, but is what it is. That's what happened. They made the life choices. However, I would seriously encourage all women, like, this is love bombing. It absolutely is. Like, this pressure of like, we have to get married, we have to do this. And the fact that he kind of swooped in with like, oh, I made a call and I got us a seat together. Like, it's very charming. Like, I mean, I could see where a woman would get like, oh, your daddy owns the airline, so you could just arrange things so you could end up on a seat with me. Like, I could understand where that could feel to some women. Some women would find it creepy. Some women would find it very charming. I mean, I can understand that. However, it's love bombing. It's pushing a relationship so quickly to get close. And I saw someone online that summed this up perfectly. It's like this idea that he had to rush the relationship before she could spot the red flags. That to me, like, is the telltale sign in this whole article and their whole life together, in this whole situation, that this is a bad situation. Because her requests for waiting a year, for her wanting to finish a degree that she'd already started, she was deeply in this. Juilliard is no joke. It's a hard place to get into. You know, her requesting to wait a year was not a ridiculous request. Actually, it was probably a really smart request on her part. And the fact that he pushed and wouldn't allow her that very simple request, that tells me everything that I need to know about him, and that this relationship is not a good situation. Now, she's in this situation, she's chosen this situation. It is what it is. Not for me to tell her what her decision should be, but I want other women to understand that that is a huge red flag. And it can be really easy for some women may not feel this way, but for some women to feel like, oh, he's pushing because he really wants to be with me. Especially if you're a woman who may have been in relationships with guys who maybe have been a little more distant or a little bit more commitment phobic or things like that, or not been as aggressive. I think sometimes women can be like, oh, this must be a sign that he really wants to be with me. Always be leery of a man who insists on pushing your boundaries, especially when your boundaries are not unrealistic, when your boundaries are actually rooted in something that is very true to you. Always be leery of a guy that insists on pushing those boundaries, because you don't know what other boundaries he's willing to push. The fact that supposedly one of the barns on their property was supposed to be converted into a ballet studio for Hannah so Hannah could have her space, and it ended up becoming a kid's schoolhouse. It's like, her husband's daddy's like a billionaire. You can't build another barn so she can have a studio, you know what I mean? Like, and then the fact that her pageant gowns apparently have to be stored in the garage because there's not enough space for her. It really does feel like she's a guest in her own home. Like it's feeling like all of her stuff is getting pushed off to the side. She's not getting anything for herself. I fear, because there's a comment in the article about her taking some of her kids, I'm assuming her daughters who are old enough, to ballet class. I really feel like it's gonna turn into one of those situations of she's gonna start pushing those dreams on her kids. Maybe she will, maybe she won't, I don't know. I think it's a recipe for disaster. I think, you know, if ballet is really her passion, she should be allowed to have space. Like, she should be allowed to have a space in her home that is for her. A lot of people have been pointing out the fact that they have like a house cleaner, but that Daniel insists on no nannies. He'll have a babysitter for like when they go on date nights, but like she doesn't have nannies. You know, personal choice, and you know, I'm not here to judge. I'm not really a fan of the idea of having a nanny and passing childcare on to somebody else. My thing is, like, if you can't handle the childcare yourself, maybe you shouldn't have that many kids. But you know, you choose to have a nanny, you don't, that's your decision. But they do have a staff, and I find it kind of interesting how like they're playing it off like she does everything herself, but they also, I mean, they have a small staff that helps with the farm. They have a staff in the warehouse. I think they make a comment about like having a staff for like filming stuff and photos and social media and stuff like that. That's one of the aspects of this, is that I don't think a lot of people realize, and I fell into this because like I do everything on social media myself. Like everything I do, it's just me. Like, it's all me. I actually had somebody online, it was a guy that didn't like what I had to say and obviously wanted to say I was ugly. And he was just like, does this girl even own a mirror? And I was like, who do you think edited the video? Like, I stare at my face all the time. Like, I know what I look like. But I think that this is a big misconception, especially with people when they're, I think especially with younger people, although I was older when I started my social media stuff. And these huge content creators, when they start making a pile of money, they hire a staff. And as someone who does everything on social media myself, which is why sometimes like I just let my Instagram go for a while, or sometimes I get overwhelmed and I can't film or things like that, because I don't have a staff of people that I can just hand the stuff over to. And social media is a lot of work. And I know people love to play it off like, oh, it's not really work, it's so easy. It's easier than, I mean, digging a ditch or something, but like, it's still a lot of work, especially if you're constantly creating content to stay relevant. Doing it on your own is not easy. The people who say it's easy, like the people who are like, oh, it's really not that much work, are people who have had things handed to them. The people who had to start from scratch, didn't have a name and don't have connections, that are creating content themselves and didn't start out with enough money to start hiring things out. It's work. It's constant work. I mean, it's not physical labor work, but like, it's constant work. She has help creating the content. If you're somebody who dreams of having this sort of like tradwife content creator lifestyle, it's gonna be way too much for you to do on your own in the beginning. It's gonna be really overwhelming. A lot of this stuff, if you're trying to do it yourself, which you have to do in the beginning, because unless you're independently wealthy, you're not gonna have the money to have somebody else do things. Like, the fact that they have a staff to help create content is a big factor. I'm sure that other tradwives do too. I'm sure Nara Smith does. Like, I'm sure other content creators, like at that level, when you're at millions of followers, you have a staff of people that are helping you do this stuff, so you're not the one that's doing everything. When you're a smaller content creator, you know, or who isn't independently wealthy, and you don't have a staff to do those things, social media is a constant thing, and it can lead to burnout a lot. Not necessarily because it's physically exhausting, but because it's a constant thing. Like, there's always something to do, something to update, something to check, you know, ways to drive engagement, ways to market yourself. Like, it's a constant thing. So having a social media staff, when you're trying to play like you're just like a housewife doing it on her own, when you have a staff there, like, yeah, maybe she doesn't have a nanny, but she's got people helping her with other areas of her life. So please keep that in mind. Okay, one red flag in this article, people have been commenting about, but they're not really, like, this doesn't make sense to me, is that Daniel in the article makes a comment about how sometimes Hannah gets so exhausted she can't get out of bed for a week. And a lot of people have pointed out how unhealthy that is, because she's a young, presumably healthy woman. That's not normal to be that overexhausted. I'm not surprised that she's that overexhausted, considering her life and her lifestyle and all of the physical labor it takes, the actual labor she's been through, having kids and having all these kids and having a farm and animals and husband and all this kind of stuff. Like, I'm not surprised, but if she insists on having everything cooked from scratch, she doesn't have a nanny, like, she participates in farm chores and things like that, if she's part of this, how does she stay in bed for a week and things don't fall apart? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Now, maybe this is an exaggeration and, like, she can't get out of bed for a week, meaning, like, she's, like, dragging herself out of bed and she's going through the motions, but she's exhausted. I don't know. Like, I don't know if maybe that was, like, an over-exaggeration and she actually is getting out of bed. She's just, like, having a really hard time with it. Or if she physically can't get out, because if she physically can't get out of bed, who's doing all the things that she's required to do? I don't really know exactly how that actually plays out. So while a lot of people are pointing out that line and being like, that's not normal, which it's not, but it's not that surprising. Women can burn themselves out much more easily than men can. Our nervous systems are just designed for different things. Women taking on so much and taking on too much and feeling like that constant need to be doing things, that can invigorate the masculine. It's gonna burn out the feminine. So I'm not surprised that that's happening, but to me, it's like, if that actually is happening, how is everything else in her life happening? Like, how are her kids still, like, alive and fed? They refuse to have, like, pre-made meals and stuff. Like, I don't know how that plays out. And that stood out to me as, like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand how that actually happens. So again, I don't know exactly if that's, like, an exaggeration or if there's something in this story that we're missing. Like, that didn't make full sense to me. I'm not saying that they're lying or anything like that, but it just, that part kind of stood out to me as, like, that doesn't make sense. I did find the conversation kind of Hannah and Daniel were having when the journalist asked them about pregnancy planning and things like that Hannah said that she would pray and, you know, ask if she was ready to have kids, and she's never gotten a no, which I think maybe she should stop praying so much. But then Daniel kind of makes a comment about, like, oh, well, it seems like it's always 9 months after you have a baby that happens. And she was like, well, I pray on it. And he's like, yeah, but it's always 9 months. Like, that conversation felt odd to me. I don't really know how I feel about it. I don't know. I mean, it on the one hand, it felt like, okay, maybe he wants to stop having kids and she's not. Then on the other hand, it just felt very judgmental on his part, or I don't know. That conversation just stood out as being odd to me, and I can't really put my finger on why that felt odd to me, but it just felt odd. It felt a little judgmental. Like, she was trying to make it sound like it was a more, like, spiritual experience, and he was kind of trying to shut that down. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just reading into that. I've followed more like Tradwife content before, usually smaller creators and stuff, because, you know, I'm not against this stuff. I love cooking, so sometimes I get some good recipe ideas. You know, I mean, I'm all for people trying to live more holistically. I'm all for, you know, people deciding to live the life that they want to live. Absolutely. I think you should choose your own path. After reading this article, it doesn't feel like either of them are really actually living the path that they want to live, that they got into this situation. And it does feel a little bit like Daniel's calling the shots and like he's made these decisions, but I kind of question whether or not this is really what he wants either. And I know there's a lot of people that have made content on this or talked about this who have come from either very religious or actually Mormon backgrounds, who have more knowledge about this as far as the religious aspect goes. That's not really my wheelhouse, so I can't really speak on that. But I can do more content around, you know, the concept of masculine, feminine energies and how it ties into sort of religion, religious trauma, and spirituality. I have been noticing a lot, and again, I don't want to go off on another tangent because I know this video is already really long, but a lot of things that people talk about when they're referring to the patriarchy as being a little bit more tied to religious beliefs than an actual, like, government structure and things like that. So I can get into that in another video if you guys want me to. I know this video has probably been really long, but I just, so many things. I probably could go on for like another hour or two talking about this, but I'm gonna run out of battery life, both in my camera and my own battery life. So yeah, I found this article fascinating, even though I haven't followed Ballerina Farm. If you wanna know more about some of my thoughts on Tradwives, I have another video talking about that, as well as kind of like the pick-me lifestyle. As I've talked about being a recovering pick-me girl, I do think that there is some aspects to that. I think pick-me girls can show up in different areas. I don't think Hannah's ever like bashed other women or anything like that. Like, I didn't get that kind of pick me energy, but there did feel like this attitude of like people pleasing and sacrificing yourself for other people, which I believe is another form of kind of like a pick-me behavior of like needing approval from a man and things like that. So yeah, I could probably go into this in so many other aspects, but I really just wanted to touch on some of the things that I felt really passionate about after reading this article. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Honestly, like, any engagement on this video really helps boost this in the algorithm so that I can get more people hearing this message, because I really do think that a lot of my message about masculine and feminine energies and stuff, I know a lot of people have said that they really love that I have a very like nuanced, non-judgmental, non-shameful, balanced take on things that they really enjoy, and I really enjoy giving that kind of content. Fortunately, that content doesn't get a ton of attention because it's not super controversial, so the videos don't get as many views. So any engagement on this content is really helpful and truly appreciated so that I can get more people, you know, hearing this message, because I do think that this, you know, a nuanced, non-judgmental take on some of these things and some of the messages I talk about, I just think are really important, especially for young women. So yeah, so any help boosting this in the algorithm, sharing it, liking it, commenting, subscribe to my channel, anything is really helpful and really appreciated. If you have any thoughts on this article or any topics, any topic requests you want me to make videos on, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you and I love your suggestions. Make sure you like this video and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you want to connect to your dark feminine energy, I highly suggest you check out the Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal. It's available on Amazon. I actually have some really exciting new courses, masterclasses. You can check out links to those in the description box below, especially if you're like a mom or a new mom and you want to connect to your chest area, reconnect to that area because maybe you've been doing a lot of breastfeeding or something like that, or just been feeling like your body is not your own anymore. I have a new course, Breast Massage Magic, to help you reclaim and love your chest area as a woman, which I know is a kind of a sensitive area for a lot of women. So be sure you check that out. Details in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.